Welcome back to my KEEPUP channel. Wagner chief slams Russian claims of huge losses inflicted on Ukraine as absurd science fiction. Fighting continues to rage at the start of all-or-nothing counteroffensive amid claims from the West that Kremlin defenses are more fragile than thought. The head of paramilitary group Wagner has slammed claims by the Russian Defense Ministry it had killed 1,500 Ukrainian soldiers in 2 days as absurd science fiction. Yevgeny Prigozhin, whose mercenary troops have spent months fighting in Bakhmut on behalf of the Kremlin, has poured scorn on his country's establishment after it claimed to have thwarted a second major offensive in Donetsk. It comes as fighting continues to rage in the eastern provinces of the war-torn country, with Kyiv's long-awaited all-or-nothing counteroffensive believed to be getting underway. Ukrainian forces have advanced in Novodonetsk by up to 5 or 6 kilometers, local reports suggest, as officials claimed fierce battles are going on for control of the settlement. Western sources have claimed that despite having to face hundreds of miles of entrenched Russian troops, the defenses manned by Vladimir Putin's troops could be more fragile than thought. Early on Monday, the Russian Defense Ministry claimed to have repelled a major offensive in South Donetsk, and made a similar claim once again on Monday night as it alleged to have thwarted a second attack. It claimed to have killed 1,500 troops and destroyed, among other military equipment, 8 main battle Leopard tanks supplied to Ukraine by its Western allies and 109 armored vehicles. But this was quickly, and very publicly, doubted by Prigozhin, who has lambasted senior officials in the Kremlin, Russian army, and Vladimir Putin himself for perceived missteps in the war effort. In remarks published on the Telegram channel of his press service, the 61-year-old said to kill that many Ukrainian troops would require daily gains of 150 kilometers, 93 miles. I therefore believe that this is simply wild and absurd science fiction, said Prigozhin. Totting up the figures provided by the ministry would imply we have already destroyed the entire planet 5 times over, he added sarcastically. The frontline assault comes after weeks of intensive behind-the-scenes preparations, including vital training by UK troops, and some 16 months after Putin's illegal invasion. American and European military officials advising Kyiv to have claimed that Kremlin defensive lines may be fragile, an insider told The Economist today. Semyon Pegev, a prominent Kremlin-affiliated blogger, confirmed that Ukraine had some success in an attack in Novoselivka-Ugledar and claimed updates from the Russian-controlled region were more and more alarming every hour. Pegev, commonly known under his alias War Gonzo, said the war is heating up and that today's attack was much more serious than yesterday. Ukrainian forces punched through Russian defensive lines in southeast Ukraine for a second day as fighting raged at several flashpoints along the 600-mile front line. Ukrainian soldiers were seen scrambling out of trenches today as attacks were carried out in Novodorovka, Rivnopol and Velika Novosilka. Kyiv said their forces were indeed increasing offensive operations and making gains, as Russian officials said that Moscow's forces have foiled at least one assault. But Ukrainian officials have suggested some of the Russian announcements were misinformation as speculation grows about a widely anticipated counteroffensive after more than 15 months of war. Ed Arnold, of the Royal United Services Institute think tank, said, "We are seeing a lot more Ukrainian military activity and reconnaissance on a larger scale. They need to understand the disposition of Russian forces and to unmask the Russian guns, which have a range of 12 to 18 miles and have been placed with overlapping arcs to cover as much of the front line as possible. Storm shadows could be used for high-value targets, such as ammunition stores for these Russian guns," Mr. Arnold said. Details of the crucial advance remained shrouded in secrecy. A news blackout, imposed by Ukraine and supported by its allies such as the UK, meant details were scarce. Reports of the counteroffensive came from Russian military bloggers and the head of the Wagner paramilitary group. Vladimir Rogov, an official in the Russia-backed administration of Ukraine's partly occupied Zaporizhzhia province, said fighting resumed on its border with the eastern Donetsk province today after Russian defenses beat back a Ukrainian advance the previous day. The enemy threw an even bigger force into the attack than yesterday, Sunday, and the new attempt to break through the front line was more large-scale and organized, Rogov said, adding, A battle is underway. Rogov interpreted the Ukrainian military movements as part of an effort to reach the Sea of Azov coast and sever the land corridor to the Crimean Peninsula, which Moscow annexed in 2014. Analysts have long viewed that strategy as likely because it would cut the Russian forces in two and severely strain supplies to Crimea, which has served as a key Russian military hub in the war that started February 24, 2022. Rogov's comments came after Moscow also said that its forces thwarted large Ukrainian attacks in Donetsk province, near its border with the Zaporizhzhia province. The chief of the Wagner mercenary group has lambasted Russia's military leaders after Ukrainian armed forces managed to retake settlements on the outskirts of Bakhmut. Yevgeny Prigozhin said it was a disgrace that Kyiv's troops were able to push back Russian lines and seize Berkivka, a town in the northern suburbs of the embattled city. Prigozhin's Wagner group just last month managed to wrest Bakhmut out of Ukrainian hands after months of brutal fighting reminiscent of World War I trench warfare, with tens of thousands killed on both sides. The mercenary figurehead hit out at Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu and army chief Valery Gerasimov, taunting them and urging them to go to the front lines and see the failures for themselves as the armed factions spiral towards civil war. Now part of the settlement of Berkivka has already been lost, the troops are slowly falling back. What a disgrace. Shoigu, Gerasimov, I urge you to come to the front, raise your pistols at your men to make them go forward. Come on, you can. And if you can't, then you will die as heroes. Prigozhin's latest tirade comes as his mercenaries captured a lieutenant colonel from Vladimir Putin's regular forces in the latest example of bitter infighting in Russian ranks. The captured colonel was seen hanging his head in a humiliating video posted by the Wagner group in which he confessed his guilt and admitted to being drunk on duty after allegedly shooting at a Wagner vehicle. This follows claims by the mercenaries that the regular Russian army targeted their ranks with mines, as a clip showed their sappers clearing the explosive devices from a road. Wagner mercenaries have been fighting for Putin in Ukraine and are credited with seizing the embattled city of Bakhmut from Ukrainian armed forces after months of bloody warfare. But their success has seemingly angered regular Russian army commanders. Wagner chief Prigozhin has launched several verbal tirades at Putin's military leaders. He has accused them of ordering their troops to retreat from their positions and leaving Wagner fighters unprotected on the front lines. The captured soldier identified himself as Roman Venevitin, commander of Russia's 72nd Brigade. Venevitin, who appeared to have a broken or wounded nose, confessed that he opened fire on a Wagner PMC, private military company, vehicle while intoxicated from alcohol. He did so due to personal animosity, he claimed. The shooting damaged a Ural supply truck but did not wound any Wagner soldiers, according to the private army. Venevitin also confessed to leading a group of 10 to 12 Russian army soldiers who disarmed a Wagner rapid response group. Does personal animosity have any place at all in war? An angry Wagner commander asked Venevitin. No, the captured colonel replied sheepishly. Wagner has a reputation for battering its own traitors to death with a sledgehammer, but there is no suggestion the Russian colonel will face the same treatment. A summary execution of a high-ranking Russian commander by Wagner forces would cause unprecedented chaos in Moscow's ranks. The capture of Venevitin came hours after Wagner mercenaries were forced to clear a road of mines which they claim had been laid by the regular army corps. Prigozhin said hundreds of mines had been laid by the regular army to snare Wagner forces when they pulled out of Bakhmut after securing a rare victory for Putin in the war. We discovered about a dozen places where various explosive devices were placed, ranging from hundreds of anti-tank mines to tons of charges from Zmaygornik self-propelled missiles, Prigozhin said. Those who planted these charges were representatives of the Ministry of Defense. These explosive charges did not need to be stacked in order to hold back the enemy, since it is in the rear area. It can be assumed that they wanted to meet the advancing units of the Wagner PMC, private military company, with these charges, even though we do not walk in columns. It highlights the rift inside the Kremlin forces fighting Ukraine, and some analysts see civil war as a possibility in Russia if Putin loses the war. Despite huge losses, and a ban on recruiting prisoners from Russia's penal colonies, Prigozhin is still thought to have up to 60,000 men at his disposal. Wagner is one of several private armies in Russia. Chechen warlord leader Ramzan Kadyrov controls a heavily armed group of his own, and Russian energy giant Gazprom has set up its own private military company. Source: dailymail.co.uk. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.